AM 1240 and 95.3 FM, WJON. This is Health Matters, brought to you by Rejuve Medical. And my guest today is Kari Collett, registered dietitian, A to Zinc Nutrition. Hello,
Hi.
Kari. Happy New Year.
Thank you. You too.
All right, so let's talk about diets. This time of year, one of the resolutions a lot of times people do is trying to diet. So losing weight in a lot of cases, or at least an attempt to do that.
Right, exactly.
What do you think about diets?
Well, everybody has one, so it's interesting
true.
how people frame it in such a way that they're on a diet, meaning they're making a change, and they don't always indicate what that change is, except that it implies weight loss. But here's the bottom line. I have a diet. You have a diet. Everybody is on a diet. It's just a matter of, well, what kind of diet. So, but we always tend to use it in a term of it being a restrictive thing because it's intended for weight loss instead of just it is what you eat. Your diet is what you eat.
Right, exactly. So if people want to change their diet, the interpretation is you're trying to maybe eat less or different things so you'll lose weight.
Yeah. A lot of times people focus on getting healthy and they don't always have it very clearly articulated what that means, right?
Right, exactly. So when someone has like diet soda,
oh yeah.
why do they call it that? Should it be called something different?
It should be called garbage in a can.
I know you don't like it. I kind of was leading you down that path.
You did.
Okay, so let's talk about popular diets.
Okay.
Diets
sure.
that we're seeing people attempt to do, and in some cases have some success.
Yeah, right.
To try to lose weight.
Yeah. Well, one of the most popular diets right now is the ketogenic diet, and really in my dietetic training, we did learn that there is value for this diet, but typically it's for a medical purpose, and the medical purpose of that diet is to help people with any kind of neurological or specifically seizure disorder reverse their inkling to have seizures, because the high fat myelinates those neurons in the brain, and so it allows the messages to move back and forth in the brain like they're supposed to. And so that fat allows for that clear communication, therefore relieving the seizures. But that's not what people are using that diet for, as obviously there aren't that many people with seizure disorders. They're using it for weight loss. So.
Right. Can it be effective?
Well, it can be effective, and one of the reasons it can be effective is because it's very satiating, meaning you get full. I mean, if it's a high-fat diet, you're not left hungry for other things. It's not like you're starving on a diet. It also, the foods are typically pretty desirable. I mean, who doesn't love some fat, right? So in that sense, it can facilitate weight loss, and your body, if you're doing it right, eventually converts into burning ketones, which can facilitate weight loss. But a lot of people struggle with that diet long term. It's just not sustainable. I mean, it's because a true ketogenic diet is 85% fat and only 15% carbohydrate and protein combined. So what does that look like? Well, that looks like a lot of butter, a lot of cream, a lot of coconut oil, coconut foods, because even things like nuts, avocados, even protein meats are too high in their other components, and we never reach that 85% fat.
Right. So it's 85% fat, but it's not, you don't get to just pick. Like,
right.
I want that fat or that fat. There's specific fats you must consume.
Well, it's not that it's specific fats, because it could be any type of fat. Like, you could drink olive oil if you wanted to. So the problem, though, is that to try to eat a whole food and healthy diet on a ketogenic diet, you're going to be eating foods that also have carbs and protein. So like an avocado, for example, is really great healthy fat. It's really full of fat, but there's too many carbohydrates and there's some protein in an avocado, but like a steak, you can eat a high fat steak, but now you're getting way too much protein. See the challenge with a true ketogenic diet?
So it's limiting as to what fats you can have because you can't add on the calories.
Right. So it ends up being primarily animal fats, which are inflammatory and problematic from a heart disease standpoint, because animal fats, specifically, the butter and the cream and things like that, are just fat and nothing else. There's not a lot of protein or carbohydrate in those products. So that's why it becomes problematic, is you're not eating very healthy foods when you follow that diet.
If someone were to do that keto diet, how long do they typically stay on it?
I've heard of people staying on it for 3 to 6 months.
Can you lose weight in 3 to 6 months on it?
You can, and of course, but then once you quit eating that way, people do tend to gain weight. But
why does it come back?
Well, because we've changed the fat burning mechanism. Primarily we've gone from now ketone burning into glucose burning, which is actually what your body needs and wants primarily. But a lot of times what happens, it's not just that people are adding in carbs. They're not adding back in fruits and vegetables and things like that, right? They're adding back in their processed products. Like they're adding, breads and pastas and things like that, which aren't necessarily bad, but they're going to promote weight gain because they're product. They're not whole food. If we were adding back in fruits and, whole grains like barley or oatmeal or something like that, it would be less problematic in terms of weight gain.
So if you went with a keto diet and then decided, okay, once I've lost the weight I wanted to lose, then to do kind of a sustaining type of diet that isn't necessarily going to be weight loss, but it could at least allow you to not put it back on.
Right, and that would just be a whole food focused diet. So the other thing, people misunderstand with the keto diet is like the high meat. I suspect what people are really doing is more of an Atkins type approach, where it's more protein than it is fat. And so making it sustainable just by adding in whole foods, good carbohydrate foods, is going to potentially maintain that weight loss better.
Okay, today we're talking about diets. Okay, so we went through the keto diet. So let's move on to the next one, intermittent fasting.
Yeah, intermittent fasting has really gained popularity in the last few years because people have begun to realize that intermittent fasting allows for the digestive system to truly rest. It's kind of like if your office here at the radio station closes down at night and everybody goes home, and then the cleaning crew comes in while everybody's gone, and then they go away by morning. Now you have a clean building when you come in, right?
That's what happens, actually.
Actually, I believe it. That's the way a lot of businesses are run. So that's kind of like our digestive system. Then when we intermittent fast, we allow for everything to leave the digestive system. The cleaning up crew comes in. It's the bacteria in our gut, really. And then by the next day when we want to start digestion all over again, it's all clean and clear. And so really what that does then is it promotes a boost in immune system function, so we reduce inflammation by doing that. And so it can be beneficial for a lot of reasons, but primarily the immune system.
Okay, so how does this work? How does someone pull off intermittent fasting? What does their day look like?
Well, it depends on what kind of intermittent fasting people do. Some people do 5 days a week of fasting, like they don't eat anything. So you don't eat for 5 days. And then they eat on weekends. Or just the opposite. Some people eat all week but not on weekends. Some people follow a more regular schedule where they'll eat between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. during the day. And then the rest of that time is fasting time. So one of the key problems, though, with intermittent fasting is that sometimes people don't eat enough during their eating time. So if you're only eating from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., you have to make sure you're eating enough, or we're not strengthening the immune system, we're challenging it because now our body's under stress from not having enough calories. So that's kind of the biggest mistake that people make if they attempt that intermittent fasting.
This kind of sounds like something I remember kids in high school that were in wrestling did. Where they would fast, and then after they weighed in, then they would go and just eat a ton of food.
Yeah, I don't consider that
doesn't sound like
fasting.
I never thought that was very healthy.
No, that approach is not healthy. That's really restrictive on calorie and even fluid intake. And then once they meet that criteria for weighing in, then they binge. And that's not intermittent fasting at all.
So with intermittent fasting, there's no binging.
Oh, no.
Okay.
No, you strategically eat during your eating window, and you eat whole and healthy foods, because if you only have a limited period of time to eat and you have to fill your calories, you're not going to eat a bunch of junk, because then you're not going to feel good during your off time either, right? So people that intermittent fast tend to really focus more on whole foods because they have a limited time period to eat.
I can tell you kind of like this one better than the keto diet.
Definitely.
Okay.
This one makes a little bit more sense. It's a little bit more sustainable.
Right.
And it's got a little bit more flexibility to it.
And weight loss can come from this.
And you can get weight loss from this too, absolutely.
How about energy levels?
A lot of people report that they do have increased energy levels because their bodies aren't constantly working at digestion. So when we're digesting, our blood flow, our blood supply moves to our inner cavity, right? So if we're not digesting all the time, our energy can flow to other parts of our body, which enhances our ability to function sometimes.
Okay, so there's definitely some benefit with doing that. Any other pros that we haven't touched on in regards to intermittent fasting?
Well, not necessarily, other than it just makes people really aware of their habits. So I've attempted to fast a couple of different times just because I like to be my own guinea pig. I don't do very well with it because I don't have enough spare energy to do that. But what it did for me at that time was made me aware of how often I just absentmindedly reach into my snack drawer at work just to grab something to eat because I can, right? And so it makes people more aware of what's their body really telling them, what do they need, when, and how much, rather than just kind of eating absentmindedly.
even though we haven't, I don't know if we've ever had a topic specifically on diets, but when we've talked about kind of eating habits, I know you've talked about if you're grazing healthily, that can still be okay.
It can be, absolutely.
How about some of the negatives with intermittent fasting?
Well, like I said, sometimes people don't eat enough during that window, and then it just puts stress on the body, and the whole inflammation support piece of it just backfires. Women also struggle a little bit more with intermittent fasting than men do, primarily because women's bodies are designed to protect the baby. Whether or not a woman is pregnant or not, your body that's what it's for, as a woman. And so women's bodies don't want those periods of not eating because that wouldn't protect her body or the baby's body.
So this doesn't work as well for women.
It doesn't work as well for women. And I would say, too, that it doesn't work as well for athletes. It can, depending on the type of athlete, but people that restrict eating before or after events, if it's, for example, if their event is during their not eating time, they could put themselves at risk of injury because they don't have the fuel they need to perform or to repair afterwards.
Because you don't have energy, because you haven't put anything in your body to give yourself energy.
Yep. So some athletes can do it, but they should know how to do it.
If you're trying to do intermittent fasting, all of us, especially when you start off, you're going to get hunger pains. You're going to be like, I'm supposed to be eating now. How do you fight through that? And does that get better, easier over time?
That's a legitimate and good question, Jay. So what a lot of my patients will do is they'll start with a 12-hour window. They'll start with, they'll eat from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And they'll do that for a couple of weeks until they get used to it. And then they'll start to shrink that window, then 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. and then eventually like 10 to 6 or something like that. So they work at it gradually until they become more accustomed to that. And then there are also those times when you kind of want to throw off the body messaging. You want to maybe on weekends shake it up a little bit on occasion. Not eat exactly the same every day.
How much time would you consider to be a fast? How many hours?
Well, minimum 12.
Okay.
Yeah, but if you really want to be serious about intermittent fasting, you go a little bit longer than that. Some people even do 20 hours a day, where they only eat from noon until 4. Period. That's it.
And
but then they have to get in all those calories in 4 hours. I couldn't do that. That would not work for me.
So you think 12 hours is a realistic? Could you lose weight if you just took 12 hours off of eating a day?
You could, but it won't be as effective as longer.
Okay.
And not because of the calorie restriction, just because of the resting period.
All right. Kari Collett is our guest today from A to Zinc Nutrition. She's a registered dietitian. This is Health Matters.